As YouTube has been cracking down on monetization of videos which express an anti-establishment perspective and has raised the hurdles a YouTuber must leap before he or she can even attempt to get her or his channel monetized, many YouTubers have turned to patronage through various external outlets. One such service is provided by Patreon. If you would like to help support this channel and encourage the creation of additional content here, please consider becoming my patron through Patreon, link in the video description. Hello and good evening or good morning or good afternoon or good whatever time of night or day it happens to be wherever you happen to be. Welcome to Republic News. I'm your hostess, Liviana. Many of you may have heard of something called toxic masculinity. Most likely you've heard certain people making assertions such as all masculinity is toxic. You'll hear this claim made by some third-wave feminists and assorted outrage mongers. I say that they are wrong and that there is non-toxic masculinity. The concept of toxic masculinity was actually developed by the mythopoetic men's movement and not by feminists at all. It should go without saying that the mythopoetic men's movement would not have agreed with the claim that all masculinity is toxic. In fact, their development of the idea of toxic masculinity was in contrast to what they named deep masculinity. So let me talk about the mythopoetic men's movement briefly, and in the course of this I will explain their concept of toxic masculinity as distinct from what seems to be a perversion of this idea by later allegedly feminist writers and activists. I will also be explaining their concept of deep masculinity. The mythopoetic men's movement was made up of several organizations which began working with the Jungian notion of archetypes and neo-Jungian interpretations thereof in the early 1980s. They were inspired by, among others, Robert Bly and Joseph Campbell. On the basis of these concepts, they began trying to revive what could be called men's mysteries in the form of various rituals which they practiced at their gatherings. Among their practices were drumming, chanting, and sweat lodges, and so forth. They would also engage in storytelling, recounting various myths, legends, and folk tales. They believed that deep masculinity had become lost as a result of industrialization and its consequences, and that the dominance of toxic masculinity was a result. Among the consequences of industrialization, which they said had weakened deep male energy, was the separation of fathers from families as they went into the factories to work. This, they asserted, kept young men from being initiated into manhood through rites of passage found prominently in pre-industrial societies, and necessitated boys being raised by females in the absence of their fathers, thus having no strong male role models to emulate who do not seem cold and distant, since when the father would come home from work, he would be tired, and, that would convey a sense of coldness and distance. Among other factors contributing to toxic masculinity are social pressure to focus on the rational faculty of the psyche and thus discouragement of men expressing emotion, an increased attitude of competition toward other men rather than celebration of masculinity in spiritual camaraderie, and an encouragement to be tough, which might be compared to the Latin American concept of machismo. And this promotion of toughness has resulted in higher incidences of lung cancer and cirrhosis of the liver among men. For some, a return to an agrarian society was seen as potentially reviving the deep masculinity as opposed to toxic masculinity, which they regarded as an aspect of a warrior ethic. Contrariwise, they also regarded those who fight fires as part of this deep masculinity, where many modern tribalist movements have placed firefighters and EMTs, for example, into the warrior class, along with soldiers and peace officers or police. In contrast with Dr. Jordan Peterson, a neo-Jungian with some popularity currently, the mythopoetic men's movement avoided political stances and activism. Among the symptoms of toxic masculinity are said to be homophobia, an unwillingness to seek help because of the idea of self-reliance, devaluation of women, sexual assault, domestic violence, bullying, promiscuity, and other risky behavior, dysfunctional relationships, greed, stress, and depression. Greater substance abuse can also be a result, due again to the idea of self-reliance promoted by the industrialized idea of rugged individualism, as well as the promotion of risky behavior. Greater promiscuity, another example of risky behavior, can also result in a higher rate of STDs. All of these are contrasted with the effects of deep masculinity, which includes success at work, pride in one's skill at sports, providing for one's family, being faithful to friends, and standing in solidarity with those friends in times of adversity or persecution. So, in reference to some of these effects of deep masculinity, let me tell you why I decided to make this video. A couple of weeks ago, I was chatting with a particular guy friend, and in the course of our conversation, he mentioned some financial challenges, including having to scrape change together to get lunch for his child. He seemed a bit embarrassed to admit this to me, but he was venting. Now, venting is something we women do quite a lot among ourselves. We learn over time not to do it so much around men because men have a tendency to want to solve the issue for us, and that's not the purpose of venting. Venting is just letting off steam. We don't necessarily want any help or advice. We just want to express our frustrations so they don't stay inside and turn into some kind of psychological complex. As I said, guys don't vent much in this industrialized society, and seem to find it rather challenging to cotton to any sort of disadvantaged state, probably seeing it as an admission of weakness. Now, this is a generalization, but that means that it's generally true. It's not an admission of weakness, though. It's simply an acceptance of one's own need for others, one's own interdependence in society, and that's what a society is, after all. Rugged individualism was a lie in Herbert Hoover's time to promote, mostly to discourage labor union solidarity. But it's still a lie today. People need other people. That's what a society is. It's a give and take, and you can't just take, you also have to give. But sometimes you have to rely on other people. That's the entire purpose of having a society, a family, or a tribe, or whatever kind of social unit you happen to affiliate with, some kind of a fraternity or a society, or one could say a religious congregation, for example, amongst those who are religious. People need other people, and there is no admission of weakness in that. And a man, not a boy, but a man, not a scum, but a man, knows that his responsibility to his child is far more important than any sense of machismo or ego. This was a clear example of deep masculinity on my friend's part, I believe. His admission to me. This friend has also shown deep masculinity in another situation when one of his guy friends was dragged into some drama and verbally assaulted by many on social media. My friend, however, despite thinking his friend had messed up a bit, stood by the guy in solidarity and refused to throw him under the bus, which resulted in verbal assault directed at my friend as well. He might have been able to avoid that and some other unpleasant consequences. He might even have gotten some benefit if he had betrayed his friend, but he wouldn't do that. He considers the guy like a brother. And this is also, as I have said, an example of deep masculinity. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know firsthand that there is non-toxic masculinity. I have observed this non-toxic masculinity, or deep masculinity, in many men I have known, and the existence of such men improves society and the world. We would be poorer in many ways if not for such men. So look for these traits in the men you know, and when you find them, be glad such men are in the world. These are good men, non-toxic men, and they should be valued. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to be notified of all new content. Please also consider sharing this video on your social media. I do have a Discord server for my subscribers, which is called Lives, Livestreams, and Vids, and you may find an invitation link in the video description if you would like to join. If you like what I do here on YouTube and or at the Progressive Flame, again, please consider becoming my patron through Patreon. The link for my Patreon is also in the video description. Until next time, have fun, but stay safe. For Republic News, this is Liviana, signing off.